Hello and a very warm welcome to Motion in Control, a virtual conference spread over 4 days with interesting panel discussions and insightful technical presentations. This is specially curated for engineers, R&D professionals from OEMs and suppliers. The event aims to provide participants a deeper understanding of vehicle dynamics. The event is organized by Society of Automotive Engineers, Northern India section, in association with Mobility Outlook. The conference is supported by ICAT, Aspire, and Maruti Suzuki. Bosch and CEAT are supporting Motion Control 2021 as technology demonstration partners. ATS, AB Dynamics, and OXTS are the other sponsors supporting the event. To begin the proceedings, I would like to invite Mr. Dipanshu Dev Sharma, Editor Mobility Outlook, for his welcome address.
Thank you. Thank you very much, DT. Greetings, everyone. It gives me great delight to welcome you all to the second phase of the first edition of the virtual conference titled Motion in Control, the India Vehicle Dynamics Conference. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my absolute honor and privilege to welcome today a distinguished panel for this inaugural session. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Dinesh Tyagi, Director, International Center of Automotive Technology, Mr. C.V. Raman, Chief Technology Officer and Member of Executive Board at Maruti Suzuki India, Dr. N. Saravanan, President and Chief Technology Officer, Ashok Leyland, Dr. S. Jabez Dhinagar, Senior Vice President at the Advanced Engineering Group at TVS Motor Company, Mr. Anand Kulkarni, Vice President and Product Line Head for Passenger Electrics and the Alpha Arc Architecture at Tata Motors, Mr. Avinash Chintawar, Managing Director at Robert Bosch Chassis Systems India, and Mr. Renzi Isaac, Vice President and Head of R&D and Technology at CEAT. Welcome, gentlemen. Curated for young engineers, R&D professionals from OEMs and suppliers, like my colleague just mentioned, this event aims to provide participants a deeper understanding of vehicle dynamics through technical presentations and live demonstrations on 5 different vehicles with multiple tests conducted based on various parameters. The first phase was held a fortnight back at the International Center for Automotive Technology Test Track in Manisa, where several vehicle dynamics related technologies were demonstrated on 4-wheelers, 2-wheelers, as well as commercial vehicle on the ICAT track. Tests that were conducted included steady state circular tests, double lane change, sine wave dwell, as well as braking performance tests on 4-wheelers, while 2-wheelers were taken through slalom and ABS tests. Now, may I now request my colleague to play a quick highlight video from the track event, please. Vivek? Thank you, Vivek. This probably give you a snapshot of what involved in the first phase of motion and control. And starting today, we would take a deeper dive into the subject with 4 days of discussions and talks on various subjects, various aspects of this particular subject. Right after this inaugural session, we have a technical session with focused presentations on vehicle dynamics and parameters. And we have 2 speakers, Mr. Vivek Lakhera, his general manager at Tata Motors, and Mr. Andreas Pfister from Pfister Driving Dynamics. Tomorrow, day 2 of the event would focus on software in the loop and hardware in the loop correlation and virtual validation, with technical presentations from Professor R. Krishna Kumar from IIT Madras, Mr. Anand Vijay Kumar from Tata Motors, Professor Bernard Sheikh, he's the CEO of My Dynamics AG and Research Professorship at the University of Applied Sciences at Kempten in Germany, and Mr. Raul Gimes, he's the CEO of Rapid Axle Concept Evolution Race. Day 3 would focus on ESP testing and validation with presentations by Mr. Kaniyappan P, Managing Director at Webco India, Mr. Satish M from Ashok Leyland, Mr. Girikumar Kumarish from Bosch, and Mr. Varun Arora from Hero MotoCorp. On the final day, we have a scheduled panel discussion on vehicle dynamics in future vehicles and its impact on road safety. And we have as panelists, Mr. Anand Bhangaonkar, he's the Executive Vice President at Piaggio Vehicles, Mr. Gavin Hardman, Head of Chassis Design at Hero MotoCorp, Mr. M.U.B. Rao from Mahindra Truck and Bus Division, Mr. Amardeep Singh from Maruti Suzuki, and Mr. Prashant Vijay, DGM ICAT and convener of Motion and Control. That panel discussion will be followed by 2 technical presentations on the effect of tires on vehicle handling. And we will have 2 presentations by Mr. Renzi Isaac from CIET, as well as Professor Pim Vander Jat from, he's a technical director at AB Dynamics Europe. Ladies and gentlemen, Motion and Control, the India Vehicle Dynamics Conference, is being organized by SAENIS in association with Mobility Outlook and supported by ICAT, Aspire, and Maruti Suzuki. And we are indeed thankful to our technology demonstration partners, Bosch and CIET, technology partner ATS, platinum sponsor AB Dynamics, and our gold sponsor OXTS. To all our delegates present today, welcome. Please note, after the addresses by our guests today in this inaugural session, we would engage in a short Q&A session with time permitting. And I would like to urge all of you to keep sending in your questions using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. I hope all of you have 4 days of great and meaningful participation and learning. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Motion and Control. May I now invite Mr. Dinesh Tyagi, Director ICAT, for his address, please. Mr. Tyagi, of course, needs no introduction, but he carries over 35 years of experience in the automotive industry, and his in-depth understanding of the auto industry needs has helped him align ICAT processes in line with its requirements. Mr. Tyagi has previously worked with companies such as DCM Toyota, Daewoo Motors, Ricoh Auto, and General Motors India. Mr. Tyagi, welcome. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Deepanshu. Mr. C.V. Raman, CTO MSIL, Dr. N. Saravanan, CTO Ashok Leyland, Mr. Avinash Chintavar, MD Robert Bosch, Chassis Systems, Dr. S. Javed Dinagar, SVP TVS Motors, Mr. Anand Kulkarni, VP Tata Motors, Dr. Renzi Isaac, VP CIET Limited, members from the industry, academia, guests, speakers, and participants, a very good morning and warm welcome at the opening ceremony of this 4 days event, Motion in Control 2021. It gives me great pleasure to participate in this unique workshop on vehicle dynamics organized by SAENIS, the first edition of Motion in Control 2021, which is a combination of a webinar and track events that already took place. The importance of vehicle dynamics can never be overemphasized as it continues to assume an ever-increasing significance while vehicles evolve, driven by regulations, market needs, higher road speeds, and customer expectations. Customer today expects a perfect control over the machine while operating it in any kind of terrain or a situation. Vehicle dynamics involves engineering around the driver, the machine, terrain, traffic conditions, environmental and weather conditions, and of course, ever increasing customer expectations. Suspension, rubber mounts and bushings, tires, the body structure, brake systems, steering systems, engine power control are the key elements to this engineering. It's a lot about vehicle interaction with the road friction, vehicle feedback mechanism to the driver, the traffic, driving maneuvers, and environmental conditions. In a perfectly engineered, dynamically evolved vehicle, the man and the machine must communicate with each other perfectly. The man must know the behavior of the machine, and the machine must provide the requisite feedback to the man on the steering all the time in all the conditions. In order to enable the man to exercise a perfect control over it, the job of the vehicle dynamics engineer is to translate this expectation into engineering work and its integration. The driver must always remain in full control of the machine with full confidence and should feel comfortable under challenging dynamic conditions posed by things like acceleration, braking, or steering maneuvers on slippery, wet, icy, sandy, serpentine, uphill, downhill conditions and combinations thereof. Ride comfort, handling, braking, steering and isolation, or in combinations of challenging conditions are the primary elements of vehicle dynamics related engineering. Example, when we brake from high speed and also steer the vehicle on a turn, let's say a sharp turn, for example, at a downhill, while loose pebbles are there on the side, and add to this some kind of a rain, drizzle, so more slippery. This will pose a formidable challenge on the machine and the driver. The machine and the driver must remain in constant state of dialogue with each other while the machine provides continuous feedback to the driver. Now, one small example which I wish to talk about is the steering feedback to the driver. This is a very, very important aspect in vehicle dynamics. As you all are aware that we use the steering to turn the vehicle. So while we turn the vehicle and the wheels rotate, the tires undergo certain torsion, and in combination with the road friction, it provides a certain feedback to the driver and lets the driver know that how much is the actual turn of the vehicle which has taken place and where the exact position of the turning at all the times is. We are well aware of the Ackermann geometry. I remember when I was young, it's in the mid-90s, I was working on Daewoo's CLO project. And while doing some work, I realized that the geometry of the steering was not perfect. So I was not too aware of this subject that time. So what I did was I made a perfect geometry. I modified the front struts and the linkages to achieve a perfect geometry. And to my surprise, what I found was that the steering became so soft. You never needed a power steering. Just with one finger, you could rotate the steering wheel on a standing vehicle. But then when I drove the vehicle, it was a nightmare. There was no feedback coming from the wheels to me when I was driving, and I never knew what the position of the vehicle would be. So then I realized the importance of imperfection. a deliberate imperfection which is created in the steering mechanism in order to provide a feedback to the driver, which is so important, and that to a graded feedback. More the position of the steering from the nominal central position, more force on the wheel to let the driver know, yes, you have turned so much, proportionately more. So otherwise there's a loss of judgment to the driver, which can be very detrimental. So sometimes calibrated imperfection in the systems is necessary, which provides a necessary counter mechanism. Otherwise, if there's a perfectly compliant mechanism, it just goes on remaining compliant, and in one direction it can just drift a lot, and the control is lost. So there's a need of a comfort versus handling. And these are the two mutually contradictory engineering aspects. Ride comfort, which demands isolation of shocks and vibration, needs softer elements like the shocker bushings, etc., that tend to compromise the handling aspect. A vehicle dynamics engineer needs to strike out a very sweet balance between these mutually opposing elements of ride and handling. Tires, suspension, shock absorbers, all these are the flexible elements, rubber mounts, etc., and the body structure and all the mounts, the rigidity part of that, that's important for handling. So all these need to be balanced. So optimization of the softness and stiffness parameters, both static and dynamic, is always a challenge for the engineering domain, and a compromised balance is always the outcome. So there's a lot of subjectivity which goes into the final configuration of these elements. If we take example of tire, on tire also, when we design a tire, it has many challenges, requirements of fuel consumption, fuel efficiency, the handling part, the rolling pitch and yaw part, the braking performance under and oversteering aspect of it, the wet grip, endurance by itself, the noise, rolling noise. So on the tire engineering, there are so many challenges, and ride and handling is just one part. So when you try to design a tire for a good ride and handling, you have to keep in mind so many other more parameters. So it's a very, very difficult engineering for tire. Electronics today is assisting the engineering of vehicle dynamics in a major way, albeit it comes at an additional cost. Electronic Stability Program, ESP, of Dynamic Stability Control, DSC technology detects and reduces the loss of traction, that's the skidding, and loss of steering control by automatic moderation of braking to assist the driver to steer as per the intention. Engine power is also moderated to regain the lost control sometimes. So the final evaluation of vehicle dynamics is a very subjective matter, as I said, and human-driven. Special tracks are very useful for the evaluation nonetheless. ICAT Manesar has been rendering value-added services to the industry by way of supporting the regulation framing, certification, testing, and validation for the product development. We are committed to further expand our support in the ever-changing technology space. And I'm sure this workshop will serve as a platform to share the latest developments in the field, to also deliberate upon the challenges and the future technologies required to enhance vehicle dynamics, performance, and safety, so that safer and higher performance vehicles can be developed in future. I would like to offer my best wishes for this 4-day webinar. I acknowledge your sincere efforts of my colleagues from SAE and IS, Mr. Ramanathan of ATS, Prashant Vijay of ICAT, Anup Kekkar of SAE and IS, and Deepanshu Dev Sarma of Mobility Outlook, without whose contribution this event wouldn't have taken place in this shape and this format. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tyagi, for your inaugural address. Now, I would like to invite Mr. C.V. Raman. C.V. Raman is currently the CTO and member of Executive Board of Maruti Suzuki. Prior to joining to Maruti Udyog Limited in 1984, he worked with Escorts. He is instrumental in developing Maruti Suzuki engineering into an R&D hub of Suzuki Motor Corporation outside of Japan.
Good morning, Mr. Tyagi, Chairman, SAE-NIS, Dr. Sarvanan, Dr. Dinagar, Mr. Kalra, Mr. Isaac, Mr. Chintamani, Mr. Dipanshudev Sarma, Mr. Isaac, Mr. Ramanathan, Mr. Vijay, Mr. Anup Kakkar. I think first of all, I would like to compliment the organizers for having this conference, and also before that, the track day. I've been told and I've seen reviews. It was very, very well received, and I think that's what engineer always aspires for. That whatever one is able to design and develop, one is able to actually test and see what it results in. And I would also like to thank all the partners who who supported this event, and I would like to again welcome everybody on behalf of SAE India for joining this conference and supporting this in a very big way. And it's a very, very important aspect. Of course, Mr. Tyagi has already covered all the aspects, and there is really nothing much for me to say on this topic from all aspects of the dynamics. But I have a short 3-4 slides, and I'd like to share my view. Essentially, when we look at vehicle dynamics, and this everybody knows that there are so many factors which are responsible for the dynamics of the vehicle. And what is important is that whatever the driver needs and whatever inputs and what is the feedback he gets from the vehicle, and what comfort he gets and what kind of feedback he desires, whether it is coming or not, is the important aspect. And that could be through the steering, through the brake, or through the acceleration. And there's, of course, many factors which are there in terms of weight distribution, the CG, the drivetrain, the configuration of the braking, the suspension, steering, tire setup, aerodynamics. Everybody knows all of this. And so it's a very, very complex topic where every aspect of the vehicle, including the body and the body stiffness, everything is in a way contributing to the dynamics of the vehicle. Now, if I look at it from a customer point of view and what is required, I think how we've seen the change as far as India and the infrastructure development is concerned. There's been a huge amount of change as far as the environment is concerned in terms of the road infrastructure. And India, of course, has its unique challenges of a lot of congestion. But having said that, we have about 35% of the vehicles running on the urban roads and 65% on the rural roads. And so there is a lot of diversity in the in the road requirement. Newer road forms in terms of concretizing, in terms of the type of speed breakers, new highways, new speed limits. All of this are evolving over a period of time. The second thing which is happening is that, of course, the kind of body shape which is being looked at from a vehicle has evolved over a period of time. The hatchback and the sedan is giving way to SUVs in a way. It is bringing out bigger type of vehicles, larger tire sizes from the lower end to the higher end. All of this in a way changing the weight distribution and the height. But what customer still requires and or demands is a good, comfortable ride, irrespective of the changes which are there, whether it is the environment changes and whether it is the market dynamics. The third thing, which is of course impacting, is the various subsystems, the technology development of that, and of course the regulatory requirement. There is an increased emphasis on aerodynamics and low RR tire development, and that's in a way contributing to better fuel efficiency. We all know. Recently also CO2 is something which is now being talked about in a big way. The COP26 is very focused to that, and reducing the CO2 on the vehicles is on the vehicle side is very, very important. And in a way, the dynamics do play a large role going forward. And last, of course, is the integration of new technologies. There are a lot of new technologies which are coming into the vehicle. Mr. Tyagi talked about all of them. And I'm sure today we will be talking a lot more in the next 2 to 3 days in the conference about these new technologies and what does it mean. The new kind of requirements on the road and increased emphasis towards active safety is going to drive some of these things. And we need to find a big balance through this. And the vehicle dynamics engineer's role is to find the right optimum balance for the dynamics, durability, weight, cost, and all of that. And of course, keeping the customer need in mind. Now let's see how evolution of the testing has happened and how the development of vehicle is happening. If I look at and I cut back to almost 15 years, 22 decades ago, what kind of vehicle testing which we used to do? We had to had a simple test track for endurance, but most of the dynamic development of the vehicle, the physical testing on vehicles was done on the road in the outside. And I remember, when we started developing the new Swift, the first generation Swift in 2003, 2004, and having the confidentiality was very, very important. So doing the testing early in the morning, late at night, on the roads, the specific speed breaker inputs, and all of that. That's physical testing was something which was very, very important. Slowly, that testing is now coming to the track. We have we have a very good proving ground now. We are able to bring the tracks off the road where the user is actually driving that onto the test track to be able to check for the various types of dynamics on the vehicle. But going forward, what is definitely happening is also the lead time for development and the requirement of durability and being able to improve the systems and subsystems of the various parameters much earlier in the cycle, not do it sequentially once the vehicle is built and then we do the testing and then we do engineering changes. So that's very, very expensive proposition. Concurrent development is very, very important. And so therefore, the vehicle dynamics is something which needs to be co-created, co-developed between the suppliers as well as the OEMs. And therefore, objective testing requirements have come in where we are able to do testing on the track, we are able to do bench testing, we are able to have better baseline and develop the objective testing in a much better way. And that's an improving and it's an ongoing process which is happening. The other thing which is also happening is increased usage of the CAE tools, Adams, Qasim, and so on and so forth, finding the correlation of the CAE with the bench versus the track. And that's something which is very, very important. And the dynamics space, this is a big challenge of trying to simulate those various parameters. And there are so many of them and so many subsystems which contribute to that. Trying to establish that and making sure that whatever is done on the test track, the right engineer is able to, basically, whatever is the requirement, the targets which are being set for that particular product, how they are met during the trial stages of the various vehicle build. And so trying to do that early is an important part, and the CAE tools have a large role to play, so to speak. And of course, going forward, now we are talking about how we can, bring in driving simulators and virtual proving ground to, increase the testing in the labs rather than the tracks. And therefore, we need to have a faster and a very good learning development phase much earlier in the vehicle development, and before the design proto stage, or even at the at the engineering phase itself, we are able to do that objective testing, do the CA analysis, fix the suspension parameters, and then therefore so that when the vehicle build actually happens, we are able to test it. And this is something which is ongoing, and this is a big challenge, and trying to meet that fine optimization balance is always key for the success of a product. Having said that, what is the role and how do we look at the development of this of this? I believe that the foundation and the DNA of the vehicle is very is fixed is fixed by the suspension, steering, the geometry, and the tires and the brake tuning. And this is the basic DNA, which is an important aspect, and this determines the dynamic behavior of the vehicle. The experiential learning, and I was very happy that we had this track event for this event, where actually the ride engineers can go through and understand the different ways, and also people at large can understand what is the importance of the dynamic performance. And this, I believe, is the basic platform on which any of these dynamic engineering is to work. Added to that, as the complexity and new technology is coming in, we build in the ABS and the ESP and traction control, and in future the ADAS related functions for driver assist, and these all need to evolve over a period of time, and we need to further improve the active safety going forward. But understanding of this basic dynamics is very key, and I'm saying this again and again, for an engineer to develop good capability and understanding of the engineering, the experiential learning. There is nothing which is important than the experiential learning, and that's key for the capability development for any platform engineer or the dynamics engineer. And I think that's going to be very important. And today we have these facilities where many tracks are available, and we are able to do a lot more work on this. And I am sure the conference today is going to definitely bring a lot of focus on many of these aspects. So how I look at it, the way forward, I think it's very important that we need to improve the CA prediction and of the subjective field, to reduce the number of iterations, and we need to build this judgment and this capability of experts who should be able to continuously be able to improve their judgment criteria, so that the customer does not have any issues once the vehicle is on the road. Second is, of course, integration of the upcoming technologies like ESP and ADAS into the basic vehicle DNA. Check it for the various road conditions in India, and develop use cases and what exactly is required, and accordingly develop that requirement, and the regulatory requirements should be built around that, because actually what is happening on the field, what the customer is experiencing, is going to be key. And of course, lastly, combine the CA simulation of track testing skills and better correlation, so that we are able to get a better subjective versus objective methodology. And that's going to be key for the development, because today customer is expecting model changes much quicker. And so how can we bring that? And it's a combination of all this. We need to work forward, and I'm sure the conference would discuss all these very important aspects. And I would like to wish everybody all the very best of learning in this conference. And I'd also like to thank all the organizers for organizing such a wonderful event. So thank you very much all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raman sir, for your address. Now, I would like to invite Dr. N. Saravanan. Dr. N. Saravanan is the President and Chief Technology Officer of Ashok Leyland. As the head of R&D, leads a team of over 1,500 engineers in the Ashok Leyland Technical Center. He has over 25 years of experience in the automotive industry. Prior to joining Ashok Leyland, he worked in Ford Motor Company and Intel Corporation. Over to you, Dr. Saravanan.
Good morning, everyone. I hope I'm audible. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to be part of the esteemed panel. Good morning to my esteemed panel members and the organizers. I'll quickly cover a couple of areas, particularly in the context of commercial vehicles, because unlike passenger cars, where vehicle dynamics, ride and handling, the sort of the steering field has been a mainstay for the last 15 years. In commercial vehicles, it was a stepchild in a sense. If you had asked an engineer what is the ride quality of a vehicle in commercial in India, they would have said, what do you mean ride quality? We give them good ride. Right? That's sort of what we saw 15 years back. I'll just walk you through some of the challenges we see in commercial vehicles and sort of the way forward. Yeah? A typical commercial vehicle, yeah, how is it different, right? I think unlike passenger cars, the commercial vehicles come in a wide variety of applications, all the way from a 4x2 to a 10x2. A 10x2 is like 10 wheels with 2 wheels driven. You have multiple applications, all the way from a tractor trailer, where you have a trailer with its own dynamics coming in, to a tipper that goes on rough roads and so on. So you actually end up with, for a typical commercial vehicle OEM, at least in the mid and heavy vehicle segments, you have at least 100 plus unique combinations that basically impact vehicle dynamics. And they're very, very extreme in terms of what they require. A typical example, the right-hand side top is what happens, right? Even if you get the perfect vehicle dynamics, perfect ride, perfect handling, perfect steering in the during launch, what actually happens? Sorry about that. Something else. What actually happens is when the vehicle goes into the field, you see a typical overloading. So all the dynamics is set up goes for bust. The second thing is the fact that the same vehicle typically maneuvers in a rough road, like a mining application, comes out of the mine and goes on a tar road. So the idea that you have to have a balance between the dynamics in a rough road, you need to have a balance between overload capability and ride quality is a big challenge, and sort of this sort of impacts quite a bit. The third aspect we typically see, which we don't see too much in passenger vehicles, heavy modification of elements that impact ride and handling or even steering. For example, it is very typical to see a commercial vehicle being bought and taken to a workshop to make sure the suspension springs typically are modified to an extreme extent. And this is primarily because of perception that the stiffer the spring is, the better from a durability perspective, right? And so that's all the challenges we see. The fourth, of course, is unlike a passenger car, unibody construction, so on. Typically, trucks have two suspensions that impact the vehicle dynamics. One is on the cab, the other is on the vehicle suspension itself. So the evolution of the last 15 years, I think if you see a basic truck 15 years back, it was basically a vehicle, a rolling chassis with a fixed cab. In fact, the interface between the cab and the chassis would be fixed. So all the inputs from the road would go into the cab and so on. Only in the last few years, we're actually seeing a little bit of a shift. I won't say too much, a little bit of a shift from what is a multi-leaf suspension without shock absorbers to more of parabolic to shock absorbers and so on and so forth. We're also starting to see increased use of radial tires, which from cross-ply. And luckily, there's also some restriction on overload, especially in the long-haul industrial applications, so that helps sort of the OEMs get a better handle in terms of vehicle dynamics. But in the case of buses, there actually been much more progress, driven by both from a customer comfort perspective. You're starting to see more migration from mechanical suspension to air suspension and so on, which actually helps quite a bit in terms of ride comfort and so on. So the evolution more from infrastructure perspective, you're actually starting to see left-hand side, better infrastructure, which means expectation now is that these vehicles will handle better in higher speeds and so on. On the right side, you also see the expectation of cabin comfort. This is driven by a couple of factors. One is the fact that the operators want to run the vehicles longer to be more profitable. What used to be 8-hour shifts in a day to run a vehicle, now they have 2 drivers driving 16 hours to 18 hours a day. So the requirement for more comfort actually is sort of helping us get to better levels in terms of vehicle dynamics. Third, of course, on the left bottom side is introduction of technologies like ABS, both from a regulation perspective and also from sometimes from a feature perspective. In the case of buses, there has been much more improvement, again, driven by some of it by regulation, some of it is by the customer requirements. So what we've done, so how does a typical OEM deal with such a variety of challenges, right? On one way, you have the entire gamut of vehicles, all from 4x2, 10x2, a tipper, a tractor trailer to a long haul vehicle. On the other side, we have multiple combinations of cabs. Some are fixed cabs, some suspended cabs, some are semi-suspended cabs, and so on. You also have multiple wheelbases and so on and so forth. How does one deal with challenges? I think the approach that we have taken at Ashok Leyland is to say at least a new platform, to have a modular platform. In the context of vehicle dynamics, what that means is we have fixed the interface irrespective of the cab vehicle combination, irrespective of the wheelbases and the application. We have fixed in a sense, the geometry of the interface between the cab and the vehicle, which means a lot of the hard points are fixed upfront. And so that helps you sort of, one is achieve a lot of scale in the development process because then each individual application becomes a tuning project rather than new full geometry project. And that's sort of what we have done. I'll just walk you through some of the things we have done. So what we've done is rather than, as Mr. Raman also was saying, it is impossible to start testing each individual variant in the test track. So we actually spend a lot of time upfront simulation tools to actually get the right hard points and geometry. We also use the tools to sort of select the right suspension parameters across the entire gamut of applications so that we have specific suspension parameters, including stiffness, for example, across the variants. And then from a fine-tuning perspective, we did end up using some physical testing, but we did that on specific high-volume models, which we felt would be best served by going through one more round of fine-tuning. And for this, we used a combination of not just simulation tools, but also objective measurements and subjective measurements, including skill drivers. And the one thing I wanted to say is the objective and subjective measurements, one learning from us is what is good from a ride and handling perspective in Europe may not necessarily be the best from Indian driver perspective. One experience was when we tuned the vehicle to based on some European requirements, our drivers didn't like it at all. They felt the suspension was too soft, it was too bouncy, and so on. So there's always the local context that we kept in mind. And the third parameter, of course, is in commercial vehicles, the balance you achieve between overload capability and the ride quality. A lot of times we end up giving good ride quality, but then the customer feels the suspension is too soft, it's not capable of taking overload, and so on and so forth. I think one thing we did to achieve sort of a little bit more rationale or more maybe in terms of development cycle was to standardize some of the interfaces so that we can deal with variety better. When I say vehicle dynamics, from our perspective, at least it is limited to this subset. We look at ride and handling, in which we cover bounce, roll, and pitch behavior, isolation of impact field, primarily because the vehicles go on much more rougher roads than other vehicles, and the overall vehicle stability. That's very important, especially in trucks where you have high CG, both because of load and some of the applications like truck trailers are quite prone to even crosswinds and so on. Next is the steering feel and response. Again, from maneuverability perspective, from on-center feel and response, and from a bump brake steer perspective. Then from a gear shift quality, which I think is one of the key parameters for us in a commercial vehicle. Look at not just ergonomics, but also shift feel and gate definition from each gate to gate. And then from a drivability, we look at launchability and maneuvering, because even though the problem is challenges, when a truck comes into city, for example, it needs to have the right sort of throttle response, a sense of launchability, a slow speed response, not just brute power and torque. And then sort of finally is the braking. It's not just about how the brake performance is, how does it modulate, how does the pedal feel, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So what do we typically do? We actually look at one aspect we do is look at subjective evaluation of various parameters. This is an example of a typical subjective evaluation we do with these skill drivers. This looks at brake and acceleration pedal positions and also drivability as a subjective measurement. We do it in real applications, have a physical vehicle, have test set of skilled engineers that take it out to the application, including different road conditions, and sort of evaluate the vehicle vis-a-vis the competition and sort of see where do we want to be with respect to them and sort of are we there or not. It's more of subjective evaluation. This is more of a simulation perspective to say what should be the various parameters. What is typically 624 tip, we're looking at steering performance, parking performance, maneuverability. Of course, the final aspect we look at is this example of ride measurements, typically looking at the ride response, the spectrum at the driver's seat, co-driver's seat. In the case of bus, it will be passenger seats and so on. And then we compute something called ride index and sort of compare it to competition, look at our benchmark vehicles and so on. That's sort of typically how we do typical development process. So to summarize, actually, even though we have variety all the way from wheelbases to different architectures, the key is to use both the subjective and objective evaluation. Key is to upfront use simulation tools and so on to get to a level of where you need to be. So that just to touch on briefly on the future trends, a lot more challenges coming up. One is sort of you see this advent of alternate fuels. While it may not necessarily impact the steering geometry and the vehicle dynamics from that perspective, but from a drivability perspective, you're going to have to start looking at a different tuning, because a lot of these, including CNG, LNG, do have a lower torque at launch compared to a diesel. Somebody's used to a high torque at low RPM diesel engines will have to sort of go through this sort of change in sort of driving behavior. But I think the idea for us is to how to achieve sort of a drivability that is similar to a diesel. Electrification brings its own challenges. In this case, you have actually high torque at launch. You have to look at the impact of regeneration in terms of braking. You have to look at the battery packaging, both in terms of CG. While in trucks, it may be on the chassis side. If you look at the buses, it may be on the roof. So what happens in terms of CG and the handling behavior? You have in some cases where the motors are on the axles, the impact of high unsprung mass on the axle and therefore resulting ride and handling behavior. Then you have impact of high EV specific tires, and then sort of the overall impact, I think, could be quite large. So I think there's a need to look at the impact of electrification on vehicle dynamics especially. Of course, then comes the safety norms and its impact to vehicle dynamics. And I think next onwards is the fact that there's a demand for higher speeds, safer driving vehicles, and that again impacts us. Again, demand for better driving comfort. This comes from that customer, and then increased penetration of ADAS. And I think this sort of covers at a high level what we see in the commercial vehicle in the trend forward. And once again, I want to thank all the organizers for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Saravanan. Now I would like to invite Mr. Avinash Chintawad. Mr. Avinash Chintawad is the Managing Director of Robert Bosch JJ Systems, India. With 34 years of service in Bosch, he has worked in various functions such as process planning, manufacturing, projects, and corporate functions. Hello, Mr. Chintawad, are you there?
Yes. Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. So, first of all, very good morning from my side. And I thank the organizers for giving this opportunity. And also, very good morning to the panelists, key speakers, and also the all participants. So today, when Raman-san and also Mr. Saravanan and Mr. Tyagi, they covered various technology aspects of the vehicles. What I would like to emphasize today upon is the accidents in India, how can we save lives, and how the technology can be enabler for saving the life. So some basic data. India annually has a fatality of 150,000 plus people. You can say about every hour we lose a lot of people in accidents. And this basically, there is analysis available that the accidents are caused by various means. But when it comes to one simple statistics, out of the total accidents, around 270,000 accidents in a year are caused by where car is involved. Yeah? And out of these 270,000 accidents, 15% of the accidents are caused because the car has lost the control, loss of control. And considering the today's title of the session, motion in control, it really very well matches that if we have a car in control, or our motion of the car in control, we could avoid this 15%, about 43,000 accidents in a year. And if we are able to save these 43,000 accidents in a year, we can save 9,000 lives and around 50,000 minor and major injuries. That's the impact, yeah. And then question comes, how do we keep the car in control? The presentations what Raman San and also Mr. Saravanan has shared, one of the enablers for the car safety is ABS and ESP. If you look at India's journey towards vehicle safety, in 2019, ABS was legislated in our country, not only for four-wheelers, but also for two-wheelers. And this was a great step. We must thank the Ministry of Road Transport. Our vehicles have become far safer. But ABS is the low end of the technology. It only helps to avoid the locking of the brakes. And with whatever happens with locking of the brake, the driver loses the control to steer and the vehicle gets skid. But there is surely a step beyond that, and that step is Electronic Stability Program, or ESP. Globally, the installation rate for ESP is above 80%, and India is far behind, lacking. Our installation rates of ESP in India are below 20%. And how do we really get benefited from ESP was also visible from some of the slides. Basically, ESP helps the driver to keep the vehicle under control when there is a sudden requirement on the street to steer the vehicle when an obstacle is seen. And with ESP, driver is able to steer the vehicle and bring the vehicle back into the lane. Yeah. So when we are able to achieve this, we are avoiding multiple accident chances, either hitting a vehicle in another lane or the vehicle getting out of control and losing the track and losing the road and getting rolled over. So multiple forms of accidents can be avoided, and ESP is a technology which basically enables it. In India, there are various installation rates from multiple manufacturers. Some companies are far ahead and some companies are catching up. But what I can proudly say that most of the upcoming models, they are coming with ESP as an option, because ESP is still not mandated. But a vehicle owner who would like to own a very safe vehicle, the manufacturers are giving them a choice. And that's really a matter of compliment for all Indian OEMs who have brought the latest models in India with ESP as an option to the car drivers. Looking back to the ESP history, ESP is not new. In 2020, ESP has completed 25 years. Bosch has developed ESP together with Daimler-Benz, and now globally, like I already said, 80% plus is the installation rate, and We surely have now this option available in India. ESP is made in India, and this option enables vehicle safety. But when you look beyond vehicle safety, ESP enables multiple things. There is a lot of creativity possible. There is a lot of value-added functions possible. There are also a lot of driver assistance or ADAS functions possible with ESP as a base. Raman sir has said that the technology must become part of the basic DNA. And when you have it as a part of the basic DNA, you can multiply or you can build something on it. When ESP goes as a basic functionality in the car, there are multiple functions, and I would like to share some of them. First function is that when in India, we also many times see that on a ascending road or a descending road, vehicle loses control and tries. There's a tendency to vehicle to roll back. So ESP gives you a very simple function called as hill hold function or hill hold control, HHC. It is very simple for a driver to feel when the vehicle is ascending and it has to stop, and when the vehicle has to restart, because of gravity there is a tendency of the vehicle to roll back. When you have a ESP in the car, ESP is holding the vehicle by applying the brake on its own and avoiding the rolling back of the vehicle. And as soon as the driver pushes the accelerator, vehicle starts. ESP notices that the vehicle is in motion and vehicle goes ahead. Very simple function, but it can avoid multiple inconveniences, multiple traffic complications, and so on. Another good function of the ESP is the emergency brake assist. There are now radars available which are part of the adaptive cruise controls. With this radars, we are able to also judge that whether the vehicle is getting close to another vehicle in the front or another vehicle in the back, and driver gets a warning. That we call it as a front collision warning, FCW. But it's only warning to the driver. But if the driver still doesn't act, there is a further function available in emergency brake assist, and that means if the front collision warning has been still ignored by the driver, the emergency brake assist comes into the play and they apply the brake. And this is another feature which is possible when we have a ESP in the car. So basically, considering all the functionalities of ESP and the value-added functions and the ADAS functions which enable, will make vehicles of tomorrow in India far safer, far convenient and comfortable to drive. It is very important that that the driver also has a comfort. Not only the car driver, also a truck driver. And during the Ashok Leyland's presentation, it was shown how the cabins of the buses are going to be in future. Mr. Saravanan has shared that it is also essential that the driver gets the ergonomic place to sit and he is also comfortable out of the stress. Many ADAS functions are in the car or future in the truck will take care of improving the comfort level of the driver, not to make him sleep, but rather be in control, not get stressed, and keep his own vehicle and the passengers in the vehicle safe. How does this happen? There are multiple functions. One of the function is the driver drowsiness detection. Yeah, driver drowsiness detection is there are multiple means. One is either you detect the driver's drowsiness via camera with the help of a camera. A camera senses the eyelids of a driver, and if the eyelids are not as normal as when the driver is awake, driver gets a warning. There is a very interesting feature of the driver drowsiness also via the steering behavior. When a driver is awake, normal, his hands are moving the steering in a particular pattern. The vehicle computer is recording this pattern. And when the driver is falling asleep or drowsy, then this steering movement to change, and the vehicle computer is able to detect this change and give a signal to the driver about he getting drowsy. Technology today has multiple options to make the vehicles safer, make the vehicles comfortable, and save lives. India has signed this Stockholm Declaration of minimizing the accidents by more than 50% in a span of 10 years. And I hope that the people in India will choose more and more safer cars, not only to make their own lives safe, but also the life of others. And hence, we can look towards a safer India, because currently India constitutes 11% of the global road fatalities, which is very high. India has less than 4% of the global vehicle population, but on accident front and fatalities, we are quite bad. And this is not a good image for the country. Let us strive together, and together with OEMs and the good drivers and the good customers who are aware about the vehicle safety, we will save thousands of lives in India. So with this, I conclude, and I thank the organizers for this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chintawar. Next, please welcome Dr. S. Jabesh Dinagar. Dr. Jabesh Dinagar is currently the Senior Vice President, Advanced Engineering Group at TVS Motor Company. His association with the company is for about 18 years, and he leads the technology development.
Good morning to the co-panelists, and good morning to everyone who's attending this session. And greetings from my side for the successful conduct of this 3-day event, which is an event of great repute, and bringing all the people who are dynamic together to look at the vehicle's dynamics. So my point is two-wheeler in this is a very small part at this point. But we are eager listening to everyone, the way the vehicle dynamics is going to play a role in two-wheeler industry, especially as we embark on changing over to electric traction. And so I will have 3 parts to this thing. I don't have a presentation. Good that I don't have, because Mr. C.V. Raman and Dr. Saravanan covered most of the things which anybody will think of putting in this area, because it will be a repetition, even though I had somebody say preparing it for me from my vehicle dynamics team. Good that I am not having it, so I'm not going to talk about that. As I drove home from my office yesterday, 40 kilometers, first time I was looking at this beautiful icon of yellow color tire marks, vehicle skidding signal on my dash, and it was drizzling, mild drizzling, and I was driving. So I had to cross 3 speed breakers and quite a bit of road and some rough patches. I was trying to see what it is. Normally, I don't notice this. When I switched on the ignition, I noticed where this indicator is on my dash. So I was carefully looking at it. So I could count yesterday 8 times this flash in my dash. And nice places where I never expected it to flash, and telling me that it is keeping me safe all through these reasons. So we will discuss this safe part of it a little bit later, even though the speeds were quite low. This was a hyperactive system, which was always trying to be safe on the roads, especially on the 3 speed breakers. I could clearly see as I exit the speed breaker, it was always blinking. I was maybe hastening the vehicle's movement. The wheels are in the air, and things are read by the algorithm as things going out of control, and so it was reacting. So this is one experience. Yeah, this is there, alive, kicking and working in all the latest generation of automobiles, as our speaker from MD from Bosch Chassis System mentioned, that this is one of the welcome feature in high-end cars, and people are aspiring to have it in even low-end cars, and will be there almost every vehicle sometime. So this is constantly an additional driver sitting next to you, helping you to drive safe. And whenever you take decisions which are unsafe in the computer's eyes and sensor's eyes, it tends to correct your vehicle to a safer operating zone by whatever it does in the brakes and the traction. So then the same vehicle, I had a self-diagnosis which was screaming at me last week about front pad, brake pad need to be replaced, because I'm overriding the alerts given to me for quite some time. 2,000 kilometers back, I was exceeded the brake pad change interval by 350 kilometers. I was ignoring the red lights warnings and dreadful warnings that I'm doing something. So when I looked at the brake pad with the lights, it was still showing 4 millimeters of pad left, and the algorithm with the temperature sensor telling me, threatening me that I'm going to have an accident. So I finally went up last week, serviced the vehicle, came back from the service station in a three-wheeler, waited quite some time to get a TVS three-wheeler to ride back home. And it was heavy rains. Bangalore had quite a bit of rain last week. So I was traveling the vehicle, sitting in the center, avoiding the rain. Yeah, with the exhaust pipe of a truck nearby almost at my forehead. And this water splashing from all the tires into the vehicle. Yeah, so it's a drive. I could see this vehicle skidded at least 7, 8, 9 times in the rain pool of waters. And the driver was very scared. I could see the traction missing in times because the differential is trying to slip through the wheels on the water and puddle. And so you get a steering force in a three-wheeled vehicle very strongly. The driver has to correct it. And driver was saying, don't worry, so the vehicle is affordable. I could appreciate a still good amount of sideways movement of the vehicle and turning of the vehicle. And the driver took me, say, for a 30-kilometer ride. And this was an experience in a three-wheeler L category vehicle, and where most of these smaller companies make these vehicles. Then came a surprise last week. Before that, I was driving in a latest generation, one of the vehicles for electric scooters. I happened to drive with a friend. So this vehicle had an enormous torque, which is getting multiplied, and the wheels were really on the go. So you open the accelerator. Yeah, we have multiple controls in electric traction with the current, rate of change of current, and the way the magnetic field is pushed, and temperature related degradation, battery voltage related functions. The vehicle was really, really fast and acceleration. I could see the tires slip quite a bit in many places when the roads were, that time it was a dry area in the sand. So it was spinning quite a bit. And quite a bit scary because it's good power, good top speeds. Absolutely, ESP would have been nice in that kind of environment. The vehicles were, there was handling. So the next generation of vehicles, what we will have, and I could relate to a 100cc equivalent vehicle of that, even though the power looks very similar, but it's really much higher tractive force which goes through the wheels. And so this is a story, 3 stories of my experience as I was looking at this session. My experience in 3 vehicles, one with a top-end ESP, one without anything, and one maybe very much needing a solution. So now we look at the two-wheeler industry. Two-wheeler industry is very unique, and we were all making two-wheelers to have the fun element. We don't steer these vehicles. We bank the vehicles to steer, right? We bank all the way. Some of my friends in my company bank the vehicles all the way to 45 degrees till a spark flies in the footrest is the limit at which we can go. And so this is how the vehicles are turned. So our tires are shaped for that, and we have barely any load on the wheels. So we have a 70 kilo person sitting on a vehicle with pretty lightweight, 100 kgs, and you have a wheel reaction and the friction all the time ready to give up. So every rider in a two-wheeler, all of us drove these vehicles before we went into the four-wheelers. We know the limit of the vehicle, right? Many of us know when we take a turn in a circular center. So we know where the vehicle's limits are. Occasionally, it is given up on us. A few of us have experienced a waterfall on a circular turn looks like, or a 90-degree turn in or a U-turn. Many places we have seen the vehicles, rear wheels losing traction, the way we handled it. And the vehicle are made to be part of this fun element. Everything is mechanical, right? Throttle was mechanical till last year, it was carburetor. And there is braking is very simple. We went for a combined braking for a smaller size vehicle. And we have a very unique proposition in this vehicle. Whenever there is a stability issue, the human hand, which only part we control the steering wheel. In a 2- and 3-wheeler, we have a handlebar. And we have a unique function in 2- and 3-wheelers because we end up having throttle attached to this. when you try to stabilize the vehicle, you forget that you are already opening the throttle. So you have a bad control on the traction of the vehicle, which is very critical parameter to manage your stability. So we had a package of 2 and 3 wheeler dynamics, which are very different from 4 wheelers, because the way we put the vehicle together. If the vehicle is skidding, the user is not aware of the way the controls work. There is a good chance that he will fall. Obviously, the speeds are quite low. Most of the injuries are very minor, and many of us have gone through this part of our learning in two-wheeler industry. So the two-wheeler were ripe for these dynamics, and because the way it is positioned at 70, 60,000, earlier 50,000, now BS6 has made it 70,000 equivalent vehicles, and we couldn't afford much of these electronics. BS6 pushed us to have at least some level of electronics, and some vehicles beyond 125cc have ABS on them. And we are looking at ESP in higher end vehicles, and some of the vehicles are already seen with ESP, helping the users. Yeah, so you can't do wheelie. It is sad. Some of the customers told us, can I have a function to switch off? Can I disconnect when I want? The fun element of the vehicle or an unsafe drive of the vehicle is missing. But these vehicles are safer. These functions beautifully work. Where the traction, where the braking is optimized, enough sensors on these vehicles help us to use these vehicles in a way which is benefiting the customers. Last part of the thing comes on the electrification. It gives us a new set of challenges and new set of tools to work in the area of vehicle dynamics for 2 and 3 wheelers. So we have traction. Somebody mentioned about hill hold. Very easy in electric vehicle, right? You short the connections and through the switches. You tend to have a natural hill hold in this vehicle, natural reversing in this vehicle, natural traction control in these vehicles. Unlike an engine-driven vehicle, you can't do a partial revolution-based torque control. Theoretically, in a motorized system, you can control, if you have a sensor in the wheel, you can control tractive force on a millisecond by millisecond basis, because the controllers which run the current loop run in microseconds, pretty fast, 20 kilohertz or better. They all run in much faster rates than what our vehicles or our brake or traction systems are capable of. And the torque control is much more precise and much more capable than an engine-driven vehicle, whatever is the best possible control system can achieve. And we have too much of electronics anyway. For us, adding an inertial, it is almost the electrified vehicles have a cluster which is full of gadgetry like our cell phones, with all the possible sensor elements fitted into these vehicles. So we are having a package in electrified vehicle. We also have an excellent connectivity these vehicles have. We have a data pipeline, which is today 4G. Most likely in a few years, we will have 5G. And we have enormous amount of data on the vehicles, which is going to make this ESP and stability and safety upside down a little bit, especially on the two-wheeler industry. One of the biggest ways of doing things is crowd-sourced data. You have India, we produce about 20 million vehicles. A lot of them will slowly become electric from 25 onwards. These vehicles have a pool of data which is about the road, about the average speed, about the way the vehicles are driven, places avoided. Two-wheeler riders know every pothole in the road because he has the finest control system of any vehicle on the road. He can easily avoid. Maybe three-wheeler has slightly better control the way the drivers drive. But these crowdsourced data of these vehicles are very valuable input to these systems to make them safer, make them directly interact with the tractive systems of the vehicle, alerts to the drivers to be safer, which road, which junction, where the roads are skiddy, where there is a fine sand or a puddle of water or a pothole of unknown depth. All these data is possible because accelerometers are fitted in most of these vehicles. Can be of great help. So the mapping, what we do on a road-based mapping, a two-wheeler may end up having a part of a road-based mapping, which is side of the road is good because two-wheelers need a narrow patch of a couple of inches of road. We can manage, many of our drivers will manage in 4 to 6 inches of road width, which are good road to drive through these bad conditions of rainy days. So these vehicles will be very different. It's crowd-based data, it's a cloud-based algorithm, it is a vehicle which is warning the users about the road, about the rain, about the puddles, about the speed breakers, about the day or night. And this is the way it's going to turn out. So these vehicles will move in vehicle dynamics, safety, motion in control. But I feel this motion in control will have two parts, control in the edge, which all of us are talking today. Tomorrow's vehicles will have control in the cloud. So a lot of controls will get de-linked from the way today's controllers work in automotive. 30 controllers, 20 controllers, 10 controllers, even two-wheelers, we have 6, 7 controllers, each having his own brain and localized decision-making, many times irrespective of the other decision, irrespective of other conditions. So once we move into the next phase of two-wheeler industry, we will have more data, more capability in cloud, less capability in the vehicle, more centralized decision-making in the vehicles, making them more safer for these users. And ultimately, we will have safe roads and safe users on our vehicles, 2- and 3-wheelers, as they ride in India. But looking at the roadmap of vehicle dynamics, when we were the drivers of 80s, most of us would have driven 80s, 90s vehicles, fully mechanical. And then we were told that you don't know how to apply brake, you have to pump the brake pedal many times so that it doesn't skid. We were told about the ABS to manually operate like an ABS. On an emergency, we rarely did it. And we were also told how to handle steering in case of a skidded locked wheels, skidding rear wheels, and with the cross-ply tires. All of us were trained to do some skidding and braking and trying to see how it works. And then came the electronic to say, you don't know how to do it, we will do it better. So ABS went away. Then came the ESP, your response on an overall dynamics of the vehicle is bad, you need to do. You open the throttle all the time and make the engine polluting, because where you need not open the throttle, we went for drive-by-wire. Now we are going to say at some point, you don't even have eyes to see properly, because in a rainy day, bad day, you can't see. We have cameras, we have radars, which will see for you better. Because in cruise control, anyway, you are feeling sleepy. We will take over the road, we will take over the brake, and we will do it. Yeah, but we go in this direction, delinking the driver from the vehicle, from the driver's seat per se. We can see a day already, few companies claim that we don't need a driver, that we will take care of the driving. We are looking at regulations in UN and other places in India. One day we may not need a driver. So we are saying that the computers, what we create and the software we write is more capable and than the humans who wrote them, drive them, and use them. And so I leave you with this thought. We need a balance between everything in every category of vehicle. Two-wheelers need a balance between the level of automation, level of driver. The vehicles are built for a driver being the person who balances the vehicle. It doesn't stand on its own. We can always talk about a self-balanced scooter, which is one of the ideas which proponents say without realizing what it takes to balance, how beautifully humans balance. And to a set of vehicles in three-wheeler and small urban vehicles, moving into a four-wheeler, which are good, and moving towards a luxury segment of that to have all the features, maybe autonomous, maybe into trucks, pooled trucks, and trucks coupled together in an autonomous way. We have a long journey to go. All the best to the participants. Please dream big. And this is an area which is going to happen in a big way in the industry compared to any other area. And keep watching, keep attending, keep learning. Thank you for this time and opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dinagar. Now I would like to invite Mr. Renji Isaac. Mr. Renji Isaac is the Vice President and Head of R&D and Technology at CEAT. Began his career as tire engineer. He has more than 30 years of experience in product development, OEMs, and manufacturing in India and Europe.
Good morning, my fellow panelists, officials of SAE Mobility Outlook team, ICAT Aspire, and ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I thank the officials for giving me this opportunity, and also my best wishes for the for this conference. So we have heard about the vehicles. Now we'll talk a little about tire. And we have seen the...
Excuse me, Mr. Isaac, sorry to interrupt. Can you please go on to the full screen mode, the presentation mode?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, we have heard my previous speakers talking about the evolution in vehicle. And if you look at transportation, how it is emerging, we are at crossroads. The technology in the vehicle is emerging. We are talking about eliminating the driver from the, as Dr. Dinagar said, we are looking at eliminating the driver from the driver's seat. Environmental situation is staring at us. Fuel prices are going up. And global situation, we just have seen the electronics issues with the electronics and political situation. There are so much of things that are changing in the world, and also there is huge pressure on the project cost and to keep the project cost down. And with all these evolutions that is there, the priorities on tire performance is also changing with the emergence of new technologies. And autonomous driving is no more a myth. You can see Waymo robotaxis in Arizona. It's already running in US, and Ford vehicles are delivering pizzas to people. And tire development process is also getting developed, getting changed or updated accordingly. If you look at the tire development process, especially for an OEM, so there are different performance targets in terms of mechanical comfort, acoustic ride comfort, handling and safety, braking safety both on wet and dry road, aquaplaning, lateral and longitudinal, and then there's a host of other things: tire life, durability, rolling resistance, and of late, sustainability is also becoming a target for any tire development, and the list goes on. So finally, we review the reviews with the OEMs, agreed on the final targets. Normal lead time for development is around 9 months to 18 to 24 months. During this period, the tire undergoes multiple iteration along with the OEMs, and tire gets developed along with the vehicle. Of late, there is another trend that is picking up, that especially when OEMs are bringing a new version of an existing vehicle, they pick up the off-the-shelf tires from the tire suppliers, evaluate it, and if the tire is meeting the requirement, then it is adopted for that vehicle. So this is practically like a lottery for the tire manufacturers. But then how to handle the asset situation and make all these things faster. So we have seen the importance of CAE tools in tire development, and in vehicle development. In tire development also, we do the same thing, especially the process we follow at CAE. It starts with the virtual development and virtual testing of the product, in virtual testing and virtual development and virtual testing of the product. And once in the virtual realm, if you are able to meet at least 80-85% of the target, then only we move to the prototypes, physical prototypes. And these physical prototypes will go through component level testing. And then finally, if that is also clearing the performance target, then it goes to the final product for the vehicle level testing. This enables us to save a lot of time and also money, and also able to help us to hit the performance target with minimum number of iteration. Now, if you look at the virtual tire development realm, so there's a host of parameters we will be able to simulate using tools like Abacus and Abacus or various other simulation tools. Like we can even without physically making the tire, we'll be able to predict the inflate dimensions and the interfaces, the pressures at the interfaces, the rolling resistance, footprints, the energy distribution, which is also an indication of the durability of the tire, and the forces and moment which are needed, which are responsible for the handling of the vehicle. And of late, we have started using MF-SIFT for predicting even the ride comfort of the tire. This is quite a lot of work, but this enables this helps us to keep the help us to hit the targets right with lesser number of iterations. Once the virtual development is over, it goes through the component physical prototypes are made, and these physical prototypes will be tested in a laboratory situation. It is tested for all the durability parameters or the safety parameters, and then we can do the ride measurement using using a cleat test, or ride includes both mechanical comfort and noise comfort. So our indoor evaluation center, the anechoic chamber at our R&D center, with that we will be able to evaluate the noise and the mechanical comfort, and rolling resistance can be measured. Durability at this moment we are doing on a vehicle, but of going forward, this will also become we will be able to bring it into the laboratory. Tire wear analysis, handling, braking, etc. We are able to measure using our flat rack machine. So both the virtual development and component level validation, we are able to support OEMs also in their simulation routines. And once component level validation is through, then finally it goes to the vehicle level evaluation. This includes both objective measurements and the subjective measurement. The final sign off of the tire will happen on the subjective measurement, because that's what the customer feels, but that is supported by various subjective measurements, either in steering, handling, braking, noise, or rolling resistance. Rolling resistance is basically connected with the fuel efficiency. So all these things, the entire measurement finally enables us to support the OEMs as well as the customer with the best performing tire. As we heard, some of these parameters are conflicting. So we need to hit the right balance. So this enables us to hit the right balance, enables us to take the informed decisions and to take the right and provide a balanced tire to the customer. Now this is about future. Then what is going to be this is about the currently. Now what is going to be in the future? We have heard about previous speakers also about the future. So the future is a multimodal transportation system, and mostly it's going to be shared mobility, especially in developed countries and the urban area. And with autonomous level 4 and 5 coming, human intervention is no more needed. Vehicle is continuously in communicating with the infrastructure with other vehicles, and also checks its own health. And this avoids any surprises or emergencies. So for example, some of the product development during OEM product development is basically a test called roll stability. The roll stability is basically you give a very sudden input to the steering wheel and the vehicle should not lift. So we can simulate that in our flat rack machine. So flat rack machine, the slip angle, rate of change of slip angle is something around 18 degrees per second. So those kind of handling may not be required when the vehicle is continuously adjusting itself. It depends on the road condition, the traffic situation. And this leads to the priorities will be for the reliability of the product. So we cannot have any puncture because driver is not there. There is no one to correct the situation, and we cannot have any structural failures. And the tires will have sensors in it, and this real-time information about the tire and the tire keeps on sensing the surrounding of the tire to measure whether there is water, whether there is snow, or whether there is oil. So all these things can be sensed using this sensor and the algorithm along with it, and it talks to the vehicle and the control system, and this allows the vehicle to adjust itself to the situation around. And this is basically, don't feel this is this development is going on. Even we are also working on it. So going forward, we will be able to see. Already some companies have launched the similar system, but it's available for only race tires and such kind of things. But going forward, this is going to be a reality. So the priorities are going to get changed. So in the sense, when we talk about now puncture or not structural failures, we need to remove the air from the tire. So airless tire is going to be a reality. Tires with sensor is going to be a reality. And today handling is a priority, but going forward, noise and comfort is going to take more priority, because the when the customer is traveling in an autonomous vehicle, he is looking for comfort, and so you will be engaged in that time. You will be able to utilize for some other value-added job. So he doesn't want any disturbance from outside. So noise and comfort are going to take precedence over the other parameters. So going forward, it's an exciting, challenging, but the good thing is you still need a tire for the vehicle, whatever may be the situation at the moment, unless we find another solution to substitute tire. Thanks a lot for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Isaac. Now I would like to invite Mr. Anand Kulkarni. Mr. Anand Kulkarni is the Vice President and Product Line Head for Passenger Electrics and the Alpha Arc Architect at Tata Motors. He has 28 years of experience in engineering and product development and has extensive experience in product conceptualization, advanced product creation, program management, and delivery. Welcome, Mr. Kulkarni.
Hi, Dipanshu, just a hygiene check, whether you are able to see my slides.
Yes, please.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Morning, everyone, and good morning to my co-panelists as well. It's a pleasure to be here today at the One Motion seminar. My good friend of many years, Ramnathan, who's also the co-organizer, was very specific that I should join and share some views about our journey in vehicle dynamics and improvements that we have done over in our cars over the last 2.5 decades. Many of the speakers before me have already covered multiple of these areas in great details, and therefore I have just a summary of what I need to do or what we have done at Tata Motors in terms of vehicle dynamics. The way that I look at this is the field of vehicle dynamics is extremely vast. And even after having spent a good 25 out of my 28 years in the industry in developing, tuning, and refining vehicles, I can only claim to have scratched the surface. But importantly, and I wish to state this for all development engineers, it has also been one of the areas that has given me great satisfaction and a sense of achievement to be able to solve problems and define and refine vehicles which have been appreciated by the customers. So if I were to sort of give a broad overview, the broad field of vehicle dynamics today includes a multitude of areas and carries a multiplicity of meanings. Of course, we have seen before, we've heard before, it can not only be applied to steering, handling, and ride comfort as part of the chassis, but it also applies to NVH, noise, vibration, harshness, and more importantly, as vehicle speeds have been increasing, it applies to vehicle aerodynamics as well. It is not out of place to say that these key aspects are critical to defining the occupant's perception of the driving characteristics of the vehicle, but are also responsible for the many and often contrary requirements between ride, handling, and NVH. The resolution of these complexity, of this intense complexity, is an engineer's delight and challenge, if I may say, and one that we all enjoy solving. In addition to the broad definition that I have given in my previous slide, there's another way that I would like to explain the interaction between the chassis systems. We all know that the roads that normally we operate on or get used by automobiles, and Dinagar was very specific in talking about how roads are, etc., and how it affects two-wheelers, three-wheelers. But essentially, we cover frequencies of up to about 30-35 hertz, which are the most interesting in terms of causing excitation to the vehicle. Now, these excitations, apart from causing disturbances, will also cause path deviations, which will need to be controlled. And therefore, if we were to look at isolation and control as the two parameters of the highest interest, within them, we would realize that the causes could either be internally generated or it could be externally generated. And control issues could relate to path and to the speed. Generally speaking, the internal disturbances would get classified as refinement issues, because they are emanating primarily and principally from powertrain mounting integrity and powertrain mount responses. But external disturbances are on account of the road surfaces, aerodynamics, which causes the vehicle motion in X, Y, and Z directions, causing, as we know, vertical, longitudinal, and lateral motions. In other words, what we like to also call as roll, pitch, heave, and yaw. And all of these get classified into the ride-related aspects on the car. On the other side, path control assumes importance in terms of stability, agility, fidelity, and linearity of the vehicles, leading to a domain which we commonly call as handling, whereas speed is related to performance of the vehicle as we know it. Now, it is important to understand that each of these parameters can be experienced and understood through subjective assessments as well as objective measurements. In early days of our development journey at Tata Motors, we often swung between these two ends, whether to do subjectivity, whether to do objectivity, thinking that one would provide better answers than the other. However, I must share with all of you that it was humbling, to say the least, and to realize a little later how both of these aspects were complementary in being able to arrive at the most appropriate solution. And therefore, I think it is important that when anyone talks about vehicle dynamics, at least I would like to share with you our understanding of the debate between subjectivity and objectivity. As I've shown in the two parts, the differences are clear. On one hand, subjectivity relies heavily on interpretation or perception and is based on anecdotal expert opinion. It is reliant upon the judgment of an individual in a specific situation and how and what he reads out into that situation to make an assessment of the vehicle. And therefore, while there can be agreements in general about a certain behavior, there can equally be strong arguments about specific aspects of the behavior of the vehicle. Objectivity, on the other side, is discrete. It's almost like cast in stone, given with metrics, measurements, data in very standardized situations. It lends itself very well to mathematical models under steady state and is directionally accurate in transient models as well, which is why most of the vehicle dynamicists today want to rely more and more on objective data, objective information, and data-based solutions. And yet, while the numbers may show something, every now and then you will find cases where the objective numbers do not agree with the subjective field. And that's an important element that I would like all of us to recognize. And hence, unless the complex and sophisticated instrumentation and data acquisition techniques are complemented with expert opinion, the most optimized solution may still well be elusive. Now, as a result of having worked on multiple models over a large number of years and the periodic PDCA that we have applied to our methodologies, we were able to create a development process that has now yielded us extremely rich dividends. We now use a mix of subjective expertise and objective data collection in steady state as well as transient conditions. By virtue of having worked a long number of years on a large number of models, we have a strong repository of data on virtually all the vehicles in the Indian market, as well as from category best sellers across the world. The richness of this data and the sheer heft of this information is good to keep our engineers taking the correct decisions consistently. In the process, we have several industry veterans in this area who can intuitively solve a problem, and they only need to confirm it with data. Once again, reinforcing my previous statement on the importance of the amalgamation between subjective and objective. I'm very proud that engineers like Vivek Lakhera, who shares his thoughts in the afternoon session, have worked long and hard, turning out to be experts in this area within the country. I thought it would be a fitting conclusion to show you the broad spectrum of vehicles that we have been working on and how with our, in the various phases of our own growth, this was made possible. Until the 2000s, we were reliant strongly on the subjectivity, aided to a certain extent with steady state measurements and some CAE. Our next big move happened when we started our own kinematics and compliances measurement, the first KNC rig in the country. And this part of Asia was developed by Tata Motors way back in 2004. We also forayed into transient measurements with steering robots and the kind of stuff. This really changed the quality of inputs to our CAE teams, because now correlation data for model fine-tuning became available. And this led us to be further more comfortable with system and component level targets, which were so crucial. And in the last few years, of course, we have focused on one side to create a very strong data repository, but at the same time, and more importantly, to translate abstract customer speak and perceptions into a strong data-oriented development process. This has enabled us to not only go faster and leaner with our teams, but also make accurate design releases, resulting in faster development times. Our cars today regularly get called out for a great balance of ride and handling, and this ability to excite the customer and provide him with the right level of driving pleasure is one of the biggest joys that any automotive development engineer will have. Thank you for your patient listening, and I hope that the process that I have shared with you today encourages you to progress rapidly on your own journey, or start one in case you haven't yet. Thank you very much. And over to you, Dipanshu.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kulkarni. Now I would like to invite Mr. Dipanshu Dev Sharma to conclude the session.
Thank you very much, DT. Appreciate our speakers today for presenting such insights into the world of vehicle dynamics. We do have a fair amount of questions. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, the scheduled time for this inaugural session. However, I would like to take at least a couple of questions. Unfortunately, we've also had Mr. C.V. Raman and Dr. Saravanan had to drop off because of their pre-scheduled engagements. But please allow me to take two questions to conclude this session. First up, for Mr. Tyagi, could you, for the benefit of our attendees today, give a sense of the current and upcoming regulations in the area of vehicle dynamics? Mr. Tyagi, may I request you to kindly address that? Mr. Tyagi seems to be away. I will move on to the next question. Okay, these are questions for Mr. Raman and Dr. Saravanan, but Dr. Dinagar, there's one question for you. How do we see vehicle dynamics technology shaping up with EVs? Is it going to change in a big way? Could you take that up, Dr. Dinagar?
Yes, Dipanshu.
Yeah.
So this is an area which is upcoming and need to be learned, and we have enough expertise, like Anand mentioned, in these areas developed over a period of time for every class of vehicles. We have simulation tools which are well correlated with the data available, and they have a well proven process in every company. What are the steps to be taken? Exactly like what Anand presented, every company has their own process of doing and giving the weightage to subjective versus objective evaluation. And then they have a character for these vehicles. So you drive a vehicle today, Punch or latest Suzuki's vehicles or Honda's vehicle, and you know it, right? Every vehicle has a character. You take TVS Apache to another equivalent vehicle. Every one of them have a character on its own, which comes in the DNA of the company, because this is a weightage what we split between the objective data and the subjective data. And as we go towards EVs, there are earlier one of the speaker mentioned about the battery being what it is. All of us struggle to hide them, and there is a fight for the range. And as a number, pure academic number, 100, 200, 300, 400, whatever number it goes in each class of vehicle. And they are bulky, difficult to hide them in comfortable places. So we end up having in different places. In a two-wheeler segment, we end up coming all the way to the petrol tank heights. In a three-wheeler, we try to bury them under the seat or near. So the front and rear axle loads and front and rear wheel loads, as well as the CG position, what it traditionally used to be in IC engines, is getting changed. So it is a challenge. And then when you do traction and region, there is a region which is a variable component which constantly works, and your ABS and the ESP constantly tangles with that. So this is a tuning engineer's nightmare because the skill sets are very different. The measurement technology is identical, and the way it is tuned is very different. I know each company has struggled to follow through. Maybe in the next 2-3 years, Anand may be able to tell his journey of Nexon journey. And so I can talk about iQube's story and auto rickshaw stories. So every company is deviating from their normal norm because the way the attractive force works in motor and the response works in motor, and the way the regeneration works in vehicles when the battery is empty and full. So all these need to be looked at. Even a braking, there was a thought process which I missed in my speech related to 100% regenerative braking. Whatever is the motor's capacity, I worked in GE briefly, where a 6,000 horsepower locomotive is stopped by only electrical braking. We don't use brakes at all. So you have a dump yard of energy, as Heath said, coils. You dump energy whenever the battery is full. So the energy depleted from the vehicle during deceleration is always constant through electric. Then you have excellent controllability and much better controllability, but it happens only in the rear wheel, even though there is a shift away to the front tire. So I leave Anand to take up and add few points, and I feel this is a learning area and it's going to be a challenge, and people have done it very differently in each of these organizations.
Thank you, Dr. Nagar. Yes, over to you, Mr. Kulkarni. I also have another question for you, but you please address this.
So I'll just, because Dinakar said, I might add a couple of more points to what he said. I think he's absolutely right. This entire thing about, how does electrification shape up, and some of the points that he mentioned were right. It's not about only efficiency. It's not only about what is the best optimal path to get there. It's also about how do you provide a certain degree of comfort, convenience, and predictability. And the example that he picked up was absolutely correct. For example, we could do a lot of more region. But A, would that be good enough for a customer? And B, if that region were to kick in when the car were not to be in the most ideal of traction conditions, how is the reaction of the vehicle going to be? How does the blending happen? These are all areas where we are just scratching the surface. And as we go on, and there were references to L3, L4 level cars, but once all of this starts to come in, there's going to be a huge amount of data, algorithms, and intellect sitting on top of what it's going to be on the cars. On the being an old timer in this entire thing, I say that all of this is going to dumb down the skill of the drivers. But nonetheless, this is what is a safe way to go ahead. This is how technology is going to evolve. And I think as development engineers, this is going to be exciting stuff, exciting times for the industry.
Wonderful. I'll take a quick question for you. Our readers wanted to know what is the role of simulation in ESP evaluation, for instance. That is one. And how do you see ADAS penetration as part of the future?
So I might actually, from a simulation perspective, while we can do some things at the overall level, most of these ESP simulations or traction control simulations are done by our suppliers, including Bosch. So maybe Avinash Chintavar, who is on the panel today, is better suited to take that question. But from the other question, which you asked about electrification,
ADAS penetration, actually. The question is about ADAS penetration.
So ADAS penetration, see, when you look at ADAS, there is a multitude of features. Right. And not all of these features can be directly transplanted, implemented into any market. There's a certain level of how I would say a road infrastructure that needs to come in. There's a certain level of discipline on the roads that needs to be available in order to function to the best possible capabilities. And I'll give you an example. So for example, if you're looking at lane departures, you need to have lane markings, right?
Sure.
now, how many of the roads in India do you see that there are lane markings which are visible and for the system to pick up? As engineers, we could always design something to check the texture of the road changing in order to determine whether this is happening or not, but this becomes a difficulty. Similarly, if you have a ACC, adaptive cruise control, and when you have very sporadic, very random traffic patterns, then would you be more enabled by the feature or more hampered by the feature is something that you need to look at. This is one part of it, but then there are some other part of it. For example, AEB, or for example, a 360 surround view, or for example, some other steering interruptions or interventions, which could still be useful. So we've got to take a careful look at it. Technology is available. How does the technology assist customers in their use cases, and whether it helps them improve their safety, their level of driving skills, or whether it brings on an additional load for them to think about, is always an active evaluation that needs to be done before you implement any system. It just cannot be blindly transplanted from one part to another just because the technology exists.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Kulkarni. In fact, I'm going to come to you, Mr. Chintavar. This specific question on the role of simulation in ESP evaluation, and will the certification be actually issued based on simulation results in the future?
No, see, the ESP application is a very, very advanced and a complicated process. Yeah. Simulation helps you to minimize certain steps in the whole process. But before we say that simulation leads to a certification, we need massive amount of validation. Yeah. So let us say if we are able to prove a database that thousands of simulation results have been validated, then we can trust simulation. So there are surely some cases where now we have a large database and what we have simulated has been realized. So there are surely some examples, but the total simulation of the ESP application is still a long time to go. And secondly, part of the ESP simulation depends upon also the tires what we apply. And each vehicle, when we say that ESP is applicated, we have to also define which tires, which make, and which specification. So finally, the vehicle has to perform on a road in a given condition. And so complete simulation, in my opinion, is a long way to go, unless we have millions of database to prove that.